Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in and thank you for joining me. This is Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series as we continue through the week. I think some good topics for you today. Two things we're going to cover. One is the updates on Wells Fargo. Most of you may have remember, it was about midway through last year, Wells Fargo was accused of, and it appears there's still a lot of litigation going on, that basically they had thousands and thousands of their agents that were being compensated for opening new checking, savings accounts, and, for instance, credit card accounts. And for every time agents did that, this is kind of a simplified version, every time agents opened a certain amount of new accounts, they would get bonused for it. And it starts, of course, a program like that starts from the top, and there's a lot of people that got a lot of money for that program, and Wells Fargo certainly opened up millions of new accounts because of that. But here was the problem. They opened up false accounts, not all of them, but many people, because of the compensation, because of the competition, and because of who knows reasons why. Can't guess why people are driven to do these things. A lot of employees felt compelled to open up fake accounts, so obviously they could get compensated for more. So they were going into people's accounts, existing accounts, opening up new accounts, credit cards, checking different accounts that people were not aware of, and they did not have authorization to do so. So that's a quick summary of what was going on if you didn't know about it. But it was a huge issue for Wells Fargo. Big backlash against them. One of the biggest banks, if not the biggest in the world, and there's certainly in the United States. And now they're starting to have a ripple effect, after effect. And there's a good and bad about this I want to talk about. There's an announcement out today that they're going to close, Wells Fargo is going to close over 400 or approximately 400 branches over the next year and a half or 2 years, through 2017 through 2018. Let's call it 2 years. They're going to close upwards of 400 branches throughout the United States. And so this is never good when you hear this, because when you're closing operations like that, what that means is people's jobs. That means tax revenue to the city, to the counties, to the states, and all kinds of different things. For that, it's disappointing. It's something you don't want to hear. However, let me paint a picture of the positive side to this that I applaud and I appreciate it. And the fact is they're closing these branches. And the reason they're closing these branches because business is down is because a lot of people have left Wells Fargo because of what they did. Some of you listening to the podcast might say, well, is that fair? They paid their dues, or they paid the big fines, and people were fired and should be able to move on. Well, that's the difference in today's society with social media, with information being out as soon as possible, with details sooner than later in most cases. The positive, to me, the thing that I like to see about this, that I appreciate seeing about not closing the stores, let me make it clear, but what I appreciate about this is that people made a decision, conscious decision, ethical decision, moral decision, whatever you want to call it, to leave Wells Fargo and quit doing business with them because of what they did. I like that. Some people that work for Wells Fargo or invest in Wells Fargo might say, I can't believe you're saying that. That's not American. But let me tell you what is American. That is making a decision when someone oversees an operation, a company of no matter what size it is, in this case it was millions of people it affected, that they defrauded these people. Now, senior management had to know what was going on to a certain extent. They kept it under the wraps. There's a lot of stuff that I don't want to waste time talking about, that the CEO, there's details about data that suggests that he sold the most amount of Wells Fargo stock he's ever sold in the history of his employment with Wells Fargo several weeks before this information came out. So you could paint a lot of different pictures in which this was known and senior management knew about this at Wells Fargo. Am I picking on Wells Fargo? No. It's a topic that is out there and it should be talked about, because the thing that I appreciate about this is that people took a stance. They said, I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. You had a chance, and I'm not comfortable doing business with you. And there are other options. This is a little bit of the too big to fail conversations that took place in 2009 and 2010 about the banks. We're banking. I'm a mortgage banker. That's what I do for a living. I help people finance homes and refinance homes. So this is right. When I have these conversations, when I talk about this, I'm very familiar with the banking environment. But that doesn't mean that we stick our head in the sand and we don't understand what's going on when someone does something wrong. They did something wrong. And does it mean they should be penalized? Yeah, it does. Does it mean that they can't still build business? No, absolutely. That's a wonderful thing. We pay for, either in fines or time or whatever we do for jobs. When we do something wrong, we move along. Everybody deserves second chances, third chances, and so forth. That's the point here. Is there are two sides to this. One, there's the unfortunate side that because of the decisions that senior management made at Wells Fargo, ultimately they lost hundreds of thousands of customers, and ultimately now, then they fired several people that were given orders to do this type of stuff, which is another funny story. Not funny because it's ironic. And then now thirdly, you have over 400 branches closing in the next 2 years because of the decisions they made. Now, a lot of these people are going to continue to lose their jobs because of the decisions that Wells Fargo made as a company. Is that right? No, it's not right. Again, it's not good to see this. That's the bad, that's the ugly side of this. The positive side of it, which I really love to see, and I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, is that I love to see that people take a stance, and when they're tired of something being done, or they feel like there's been undue, or someone has taken advantage of them financially, they have choices. We have choices as consumers. And I want to encourage this, and this is the part about this I like. The part I like about this is that this tells me that hundreds of thousands of people, and I don't know the number, quit doing business with Wells Fargo, primarily maybe with their accounts, checking, savings, credit cards, maybe some loans, but mostly checking, savings, credit cards, that type of activity, maybe business loans, maybe business activities. I like that. And the reason I like that is because people are making a decision that I want to work with someone that is going to treat me right. I want to work with someone that is going to be honest. I want to work with someone that it's going to give me service and the things that I deserve. And it's unfair for any company to take a broad stroke or throw a whole blanket over an entire company and say negative things about it, because there's a lot of wonderful things big companies and small companies do. Unfortunately, when you get caught in defrauding consumers or misleading consumers or taking money from consumers or doing things that's unauthorized, especially in the financial industry that hurts people, it's news and it's newsworthy. And that's really what's going on here. So if you haven't heard again, they're closing upwards of 400 branches, Wells Fargo is, through the United States over the next 2 years. And the reason why is some of the backlash and the battles and the fallout of the scandal that took place earlier, or I should say later, in mid-2016. That's what's taking place. If you have any comments about this, you could always go to the website, check in, reradiolive.com, email me, suggestions, thoughts. We get emails and comments about different stories that we do. And this one, as I summarize, when we move on to the next segment, I'll just say that I could appreciate the fact when people decide and they make decisions on their own and they don't feel compelled or they don't feel pressured to stay with a company or work with someone that's not treating them right. I love that part. And that's the part that I appreciate about this. And that's the part that I wanted to talk about and make sure people understood, is that these are people that are trying to make a living. In some cases, businesses, small businesses, employees, doesn't matter what. They're entrusting these banks to hold their money, to invest their assets in some cases, to issue credit cards, to open checking accounts. And when you don't do it right and you can't please the customer, we all have choices. And that part is wonderful and great to see for sure. The negative side, again, of course, is that the shutting down of all these locations will affect employment in many different states and counties, tax revenue, and some of those things. But when you look at it another way, is all those people that left now have to go to some other bank, right? This is a positive way to look at it. So if 300,000 people left Wells Fargo and went to other institutions, guess what? Those other institutions are going to have to hire more people, potentially open different locations, and they'll have better resources available because people have now moved their money or moved their accounts and moved their business to other banks. And that, for that part, that's a positive, and that will have a positive effect on the economy. All right, that's enough about Wells Fargo. On the second part of the podcast, when we come back, quick break, we're going to talk about the things you need to know when getting pre-approved, the first steps. What are the important things you really need to know when you get pre-approved, and why is that step so important? Most people take it for granted and don't really understand it. So when I come back, I'm going to talk more about the details. I'll be back with you in just a minute.
For more information on today's program, visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com.
Hi, this is Joe Kuchera, host of Real Estate Radio Live and Bay Area Mortgage Planner. In addition to being your home financing expert, please remember you could always contact me for other trusted advisors such as realtors, financial planners, and CPAs. Please feel free to contact me at 408-838-9060. That's 408-838-9060, or email joe at reradiolive.com, or visit my website at reradiolive.com for more details.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome back. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series, as we continue through the week. The two topics today, just finished the first one, a review, kind of a update on Wells Fargo, and they made the announcement they're going to be closing down approximately 400 branches in 2017 and 2018. Talked a little bit about that, the negative downside of that, but what I would also consider the positive thing I discussed. If you missed that first part of the podcast, please go back and listen to it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of why pre-approvals should be your first step in purchasing a home. For some people, they might say, well, yeah, this is a no-brainer, Joe. I know that we need to get pre-approved. But believe it or not, I would say about 50 to 60% of the people that come to me or that are referred to me by realtors haven't really done the job that they should in getting pre-approved. So the education certainly still is needed and relevant and should be out there so that you really understand what a pre-approval is. I'm going to walk you through that in the second part of this podcast here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of pre-approval and why it's so important. So when buying a house, it's one thing to get on the internet and start, and by the way, 92 or 93% of people start their search on the internet. That's very typical. It's one thing to go online and start looking at different neighborhoods, locations, homes, price points, and it is exciting and trying to get an idea of what you could afford and how you could afford and where you might be able to buy. The piece that a lot of people forget to do, and it really saves you a lot of heartache and frustration down the road, is to get pre-approved even before you start looking. Doesn't mean you can't look and casually search, but one should really get pre-approved before you even start engaging with a real estate agent. If it's a good real estate agent, the first thing they're going to ask you is, have you been pre-approved? And here's the problem with that question and where problems start right away. A real estate agent might say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, have you been pre-approved? And they might say yes. And they say, great, super, let's go look for houses. All of a sudden the red flag comes up for me. And the reason why is the real estate agent should get something in writing or get on the phone and talk to the lender of record and see who they're pre-approved with to see if it's a legitimate approval or just a pre-qualification or if a conversation took place. Remember, a lot of people don't understand the difference between being pre-qualified and pre-approved. So let's start there. What's it mean to be pre-qualified? Pre-qualified would go something like this. Someone calls me on the phone, and we're on the phone, and they say, Joe, I'm thinking about buying a home. I say, great. I want to get a rough idea, Joe, what I might be able to afford. I say, great, let's take a few minutes, and let's kind of go through a process. So I ask them some questions. I say, how much do you make? And they give me a number. How much do you have for a down payment? They give me a number. What kind of liabilities and debts do you have? And we kind of go through that, and we pencil it out. And we're on the phone or in person, and we spend a half an hour to 45 minutes, depending. And we kind of figure out, okay, based on your down payment, your liabilities, and what you make, I think we could easily get you pre-approved for an $800,000 purchase with 20% down of $160,000 for sake of this example today on the podcast. But remember, that would be more of a pre-qualification and a comfort level of what someone could start looking. Now, if I go through that exercise with someone, let me tell you what I do next. I say, this is great. Thank you for calling. This is a smart thing. This is the first step. But the most important and critical thing you need to do before you start looking for a house is get a formal pre-approval. And typically they might say, well, what do you mean by that? What's the difference of what we just went through? So what I had just gone through would be really a casual pre-qualification just to get a snapshot and an idea what this person could do. But remember, the thing that one needs to think about and understand is that a person really can't get an official pre-approval, no matter what anybody tells you, unless you provide documents to prove income, assets, and liabilities. You just can't. I've talked about this before, this ridiculous stuff that you hear about rocket mortgage and electronic mortgage and get pre-approved in 5 minutes and all that stuff. That's a marketing gimmick. Yes, could you get an approval in 5 minutes? Yes, I could do that for you. Absolutely. Any lender could do that for you. That's why it's misleading, and it's a marketing gimmick that a lot of people will use. Get pre-approved in 5 minutes. No hassles. Here's the reality. You could go through a process where you go online and you type in, I make $10,000 a month, I have $200,000 in down payment, and my credit scores are X. Or you could even take the next step in that you provide the lender the authorization for them to pull credit and look at income, and they could get you. Seriously, you can get an approval, a letter that generates and says you have been underwritten initially with an approval without seeing any documentation. This is where it's misleading. If it's a very simple transaction and the loan amount's small and your credit's good and you have a W-2 job and it's just everything's really straightforward, those are really simple. When they become complicated is when you're a business owner or you have K-1s, which are partnership returns, or you have corporations, or maybe you've changed your job in the last couple of months. Let's say you've changed careers. Let's say you were in sales for 10 years, and all of a sudden you decided to go in a totally different direction, getting totally paid differently. Those things all come into play when you're getting pre-approved. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this, if you have not been pre-approved or if you need to get pre-approved, the right way to do it is to meet with someone like me or whoever you have a relationship with, and someone that you trust. And we are going to request documents. We're going to request, depending if it's a jumbo loan or if it's a complicated loan where you make your money on a self-employment and different things, we will request tax returns, at least 2 years of tax returns. If it's a pretty straightforward file and you're not self-employed, typically all we need is W-2s. So if you're a W-2 income earner and it's pretty straightforward, we will just request the last 2 years W-2s. We'll also request two most recent pay stubs. We will request asset statements that show where the down payment's coming from or what kind of reserves you have. We'll need a copy of a driver's license. We'll need authorization to pull your credit. So these are things that we will need to physically look at documents before you could get a legitimate approval. Now, here's the good news. Once we get that information, once we have those documents in front of us, in many cases, unless there's something that comes up that we're unaware of, we could get you pre-approved really quickly. We could have a formal approval, underwriting approval in writing within 24 or 48 hours. Sometimes quicker. It just depends. Don't be misled by the companies and the online groups that tell you spend 5 minutes, punch a couple of buttons in, and get a pre-approval letter. Again, it's window dressing. You could get one of these letters, but be careful of the value that they hold and the water and the weight it holds in which you are getting ready to put in an offer on a home. So if you're getting ready to purchase and you really want to be taken seriously and you want to be a legitimate buyer, what the real estate agent should be asking you is, are you pre-approved? If you say yes and they stop there, or what the real estate agent should say, if you say yes, they'll say, great, that's awesome, good to hear. Who are you working with? Do you have a letter? Is there a person I could call and verify this? That's what the real estate agent should be doing. If the real estate agent doesn't do this as a home buyer, then you should either contact your lender or bring it up to the real estate agent. Do you need a letter from me? And if the real estate agent says, oh, no, I don't need anything, just, I trust you that you've been pre-approved. Not to second guess the real estate agent, but I've been doing this long enough. The last thing you want to do is wait till the last minute or get legitimately approved or find a house that you really love and then find out that you can't afford it, or something has come up in your credit or your income or assets. Something has come up where now you might not be able to buy that house. That's the worst thing that could happen. So do the work up front. Do the work up front. Just to summarize before we finish up today, why is it so important? Make sure you meet with someone like me or someone that you trust. Get the documentation to them. Let me and my team get you pre-approved in a quick fashion, but legitimately approved by looking at your documents. We could then generate a underwriting letter that proves that you have been underwritten by our people and that you could now go out and securely feel confident in putting in an offer on a home, knowing that the financing is going to be available. So that's the true way to do it. Make sure you get it something in writing. Make sure you communicate. The other thing I would advocate to is whoever you're working with on the real estate side, make sure you connect them with your lender as soon as possible. And if there's any questions at all, I'm always a big fan of doing a conference call, or if you can, in a perfect world, have the real estate agent, the lender, and the client all get together and talk about goals, objectives, make sure everybody's on the same page. But I realize that's not always the case and realistic. So if nothing else, get on the phone call, make sure that you're all on the same page, and be sure that you get a little legitimate pre-approval, not a pre-qualification. All right, I want to thanks for tuning in today as we talked about Wells Fargo and the importance of pre-approval letters and the first step to take. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. If you want more information, go to reradiolive.com. Until next time, thank you.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at reradiolive.com.